bodies, considering that people were here from 1 AD to 1300. Yeah, we just haven't found them. They did a good job of hiding them. Last question.
So they could be just down there?
There could. There could be some right in that room right behind you.
And did the parks ever go and try to look for that, or they're kind of not allowed to?
We no longer do that. We consider it disrespectful. So you guys are going to be going into an Indian home. Now there's a couple things that I want to say. One is I'm going to ask that you please not lean on the urns, touch them. They're spirits who are still here. And the descendants of these people still come here, have ceremonies, and will leave things in the kiva. The other one is, have you ever wondered about what the people were like who used to live here? Yeah? Okay. First of all, they did look like Native Americans. Okay? Had black hair, probably dark skin. I'm going to start with men, and I'm going to give you some figures. Now, these figures are from the 1900s. At 1900, the average life expectancy for an American male was 46. For an American female, it was between 30 and 35. As medical technology has advanced, we have been living beyond men. Hooray. Okay? Now, 800 years ago, men could expect to live to be between 25 and 35 years old. Hey, over 700 years, men only gained. You see a little rough fur over there? That's why we asked you not to bring any food in here, because they bury in here. Men only gained 11 years. Men were also shrimps. They were anywhere from 5'2" to 5'5", 115 to 135 pounds. This was a worldwide thing. Women were shorter. When I'm in my bare stocking feet, I'm 4'11" and 3/4. I lie and say I'm 5 feet. Women were anywhere from 5 foot to 5'1", 90 to 100 pounds. Not big people, about my size, in fact. You can see why they hired me. Okay? Women 800 years ago could expect to live to be between 20 and 25. Hey, we gained more over time than men did. Good 20 years, okay? Women died sooner because we have this little complication in life called childbirth. And if you have a big baby and that child becomes stuck in the birth canal, you might die. In fact, you probably would die along with your baby. When I had my big babies, I'm not a big person. I weigh about 90 pounds. My big babies were 5'15" and 5'13". For some of you, those might sound like small babies. Those were huge to me. They got stuck. If I wouldn't have had medical intervention, I would have died both times. My third child, 3 pounds, they said push, I threw up, the baby came out. It was 150 pounds, at $150,000 that Benjamin cost that I had trouble with. You can imagine if you were a little woman back then and you had a big baby, maybe 6.5 pounds, you aren't going to make it. That baby comes stuck. Also, usually 3 days postpartum, an infection will start in. That's why a doctor likes for you to stay in the hospital for 3 days. You can die from that infection. Very, very common. Just to let you know what these people suffered from. These people suffered from bad teeth. They had rheumatoid arthritis. They were anemic. They were malnourished. They had problems with their legs and the tibia, to where the tibia grew faster than the rest during adolescence. Very painful. These people were just like us, weren't they? We have bad teeth. We're anemic, aren't we? I did my doctoral work in Canada, where 20 is considered the normal iron count for a woman. I seriously doubt if many of you have an iron count that exceeds 14 or 15. Native women tend to have low iron counts. Mine is always at 11. Has gotten to be as low as 8. And I have been threatened with blood transfusions. Ugh. We also suffer from rheumatoid arthritis, osteoporosis, syphilis, which these people suffered from, and you can tell that by looking at their bones, other venereal diseases, AIDS. We're also malnourished, aren't we? These little swallows up here, they're scolding on us, they're telling us to go away. What do we live on? Coca-Cola, potato chips, Yo Quiero Taco Bell, McDonald's, Burger King. We're not much different than they were. We're all Homo sapiens sapiens. The only difference between us and them is modern technology. Does anyone have any questions at this time?
Yes.
Yeah.
Were they peaceful people? Were they the people who lived here? Were they warring at all?
Only at the end with each other. There weren't any other native groups, but at the end, when resources became scarce, they started fighting amongst each other for the corn, for the water, for the squash and the beans. But the descendants of these people, they're relatively peaceful people. I mean, there's only one revolt that we know of in history, and that was in 1680 against the Spanish, led by Pope when they kicked Spanish butt. For 12 years, no Spanish rule. Then they invited the Spanish back in because you had different factions and they started warring amongst themselves again. But relatively, yeah. Except at the end, they were a very peaceful people. Someone else had a question?
If you said like this was the government area, or
Kind of, sort of, maybe.
kind of, sort of, maybe, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. Then
In a native way.
did like the other dwellings that are close to here, did they pretty much furnish, or were the people that here still like laborers also, or were they just kind of the think tank? Do you think?
They weren't laborers per se. There is, among native peoples, we're very egalitarian. And so this place wouldn't be above balcony or it wouldn't be above longhouse. But this is where maybe your chiefs would, not your chiefs, but your representatives would have met to discuss, okay, what's going to be going on over the next few days or over the next year. When are we going to have our ceremonies for different things, like the calling the kachinas, which you can hear them thundering in the background here. Or when are we going to have our ceremonies to have for our corn and for our beans. Different style of government. You had someone over here. What?
Water.
Okay, I mentioned the seep spring back
But that's
here.
only if there's precipitation.
That spring is always active. That's why we have a pipe in there. 1960, we put a pipe in there. But there's also springs up and down this canyon where you can get water from. And guess what, folks? You can walk an entire hour to the Mancos River and get some water from there. There's always water in that. Get your exercise.
The different communities actually worked pretty much together in the prime of these civilizations. There was no, Cliff Palace versus balcony.
Absolutely not.
They were all one
They were the
area.
same people.
Right.
They were the same people. It was only at the end, as I mentioned with this lady, that they started warring against each other. 1274. In fact, I'll mention now as to why they left. 1274, you have a drought. They had worse droughts in the past. This one was pretty bad because considering you had people living here from 1 AD to 1300, and at that time, on what is now Mesa Verde, you had 4,000 to 5,000 people. You're using up all your resources, all your trees. Between this canyon, Navajo Canyon, Fuchs Canyon, and Soda Canyon, you had 600 people alone. Family of four is using a tree a week, 26 to 30,000 trees a year. Your corn out there, she's not getting any moisture or any effective moisture. Might get a few scattered showers now and then, but nothing that's gonna do any good. She's screaming, "Daddy, Daddy, I'm thirsty." You can't give her any water. You hear there's water down to the south to you among the Rio Grande. So you head there and you take what's important, your family, maybe some seed. You're going to leave your tools here because you know how to make them. And you don't need to carry all that sort of stuff with you. You're going to head over to what's now Hopi. And Hopi's very interesting because they do not have running water. But the Hopi believe that they have a magical control over the rain. In fact, there's probably, maybe at Hopi, they've been having some kachina dances. Maybe that's why we're getting these showers in with all these clouds. In fact, anytime you see fog, you see mist, see clouds such as this, that symbolizes the presence of a kachina. But they left for environmental reasons.
Fire.
Yeah.
How do they keep it going forever? Because they can't start it?
Oh, no,
Oh,
they
they
could
knew how
start
to
it.
start it.
How?
With a drill.
Friction.
Friction, yeah. You have your drill going against it.
Okay, flint.
Yeah.
Yep.
Woo, okay. That bird was not happy. Yes.
How did they get up in there, the people?
Okay, this at one time this all would have been built up. Many of you, when you arrived here at Mesa Verde, you were given a little pamphlet with a map and it showed an artist's depiction on the back of what Cliff Palace would have looked like. And this would have all been built up, and you would have used ladders to get up there. Anyone else have any questions? You have a question.
Where would they farm?
Right up there, right where we were standing. Right over here. Over there. 3,000 acres. And they're going to do their farming up on top because the soil is more fertile and you receive more moisture. We had an experiment here at Mesa Verde for 60 years, from the 1920s up into the 1980s, where we planted corn. We just planted it there as if these people had planted it, left it. We only had 3 crop failures.
Oh. The whole foraging area, would that be all the way down to maybe even 160 or beyond? I mean, is this the whole mountain top?
Yeah, people would have hunted
Very
all
large
over.
area.
Yeah, people would have hunted all over. And also right in here. This right here is a pharmacy. Almost every plant here has a food or medicinal use to it. These oak tree leaves here, you can use for mosquito bites. You go to your red willow, your white willow, you got a bulging headache. You boil some of that into a tea, helps with your headache. Even poison ivy has a medicinal use for paralysis. Use the roots on it. Okay, anyone else have any questions before we head on over? One last question.
Where's the
Hey, right there. Think gravity. You bet. You can go, if you need to go to the washroom, you can go pretty fast. Yeah. Right there. Oh, absolutely. They probably had an area that was designated to be your latrine, and that's what you used.
Preferably not on your grandmother.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Great one. I'll just ask, please, sir, that you don't lean your legs over. Kind of sit Indian style. Sit Indian style. Like me. Yeah, there we go. That's right. Okay. Okay. Is everyone on up? Can everyone see? Sorry. We have a young lady coming up. Is everyone up? Can everyone see the kivas? Can you see the kivas, sir?
Now, we need a little bit more room.
Okay.
Some guys.
Yep. Okay, can you see, sir? Why don't you come on in? He's okay. You're okay back there? I want to welcome you guys to the kiva. This one is Kiva F. We have 23 here. Think of a kiva as symbolic of a clan. Kiva and Hopi means ceremonial chamber. You would have had your ceremonies down here. For that rain up there, you'd have maybe 10 to 12 elders go in here, they pray, they come out at night, they dance to bring the kachinas in. And you'd have a curing ceremony. Maybe one of you is sick and needs to be cured. So you might have a curing ceremony, or a ceremony to ensure a successful crop. Women had their own ceremonies down in here to which men were not allowed in. A kiva is representative of a sipaku, that little hole right there. Right down there. Little circular one. That is in Hopi means place of emergence. And I'm going to tell you guys another story. We're in the 4th world. We've lived in the world of water. We've lived in the world of ice. And now we're in the world of fire. Each world we've left because they've been so corrupt. We hear that there's a 4th world above us. So we send out messengers, birds, 4 of them, fly on up through the sipaku in the sky. Tell us what this 4th world is like. It's only Raven who can make it here. Raven with his strong wings flies through the sipaku. Then he flies on back and he comes to us and says, yes, man can live here. So we hold a council and we decide to migrate on up. Now you notice we all didn't arrive here at the same time. We all aren't going to go through the sipaku at the same time. Their clan is going to make it through first. But first we try to climb through the sipaku on a juniper tree. but a juniper tree isn't tall enough. Then a pinon pine, that isn't tall enough either. Finally a mountain, still not tall enough. Finally chipmunk plants a bamboo shoot that goes all the way up to the sky. We climb through that bamboo shoot, on up in this world, kind of like going through a birth canal. We come up to the top. Where to see Papa is, we knock. Grandmother Spider lets us in to trap our spider. Like good Indians, we look at her with our eyes downcast. That is a sign of respect among Native people. We say, Grandmother Spider, may we live here? Grandmother Spider says, I cannot tell you that, for this is not my land. It belongs to Massa, god of fertility, god of fire. You need to go speak to him. So we go off wandering, looking for him. And like the Hebrews in the Jewish Torah or the Christian Old Testament, we wander around. But after a while, we become hungry. So we build a dwelling, and we plant some corn. Maybe like here at Cliff Palace, there's 100 of us, and we're here for 100 years. Maybe over at Balcony House, there's 30 of us. Maybe at another place we're going to be there for 75 years and there's only 20 of us. And those people who are behind us, they're looking for us. Maybe they're over there for 30 years. Maybe they're over there for 40 years. Again, with varying populations. That's why we have so many cliff dwellings. Finally, one day, we find Massa. And we go to him again with our eyes downcast as a sign of respect. And we say, Massa, we hear this is your land. May we live here? Massa says, I need to think about it. Please don't throw things down into the kiva.
You don't know.
So he goes away for 3 days and 3 nights. And on the 4th day, he comes back. And he says, I have thought. You may live here, but you must live by my rules. You cannot be corrupt. You must lead a good life. I'll give you everything you need. I'll give you shelter. I'll give you food. Almost every plant out there has a food or medicinal use. As I said, even poison ivy. I'll give you water, the water in the back. Springs up and down this canyon, the Mancus River. I'll give you corn. He shows the people 6 different kinds of corn. Red, yellow, white, blue, speckled, and black. The Hopi are going to choose this little blue corn because it's the hardest to grow and it symbolizes the hardest life. And usually the hardest life means the best life. She got scared. Poor girl. That's something. But there is one person who makes it through who is corrupt. That person is death. And at first the people decide we will kill her. But they decide to let her live when she shows them what life is like in a parallel universe in the land of Maski, god of death. Maybe it's like this right here. We have an interpreter telling people what life was like 800 years ago with a thunder shower nearby. Some people believe that death was caused by Coyote because Coyote didn't feel people should live forever. That is my story. Now these things right here that look like benches, those are pilasters. And you'd have beams of juniper going one way, beams going another way. Then you'd have fill, and you'd repeat the process all the way up here to the top. And if you have been on the Navajo Nation, and you've seen the roofs on their hogans, you know it's a kind of crib. That's what this would be like. You'd walk over to the middle, and you cut a hole in it. The ladder going down near that big hole, the fire pit. And you might think, ooh, ick, I'm going in and out of smoke. I smell like a Texas barbecue. Smoke to native peoples is neat. You're going down into Mother Earth, you're being purified. You're coming out of Mother Earth, you're being purified as well. These areas in between here is what you would have used. Store some of your sacred goods, your precious bundles. That thing right there is a southern recess. Notice here it faces south, at balcony it does not. But that's where you would have placed your most holy objects. Objects you use for your certain ceremonies. Some of you will see some little cubby holes in here. They're called niches. And in those you place prayer sticks, kind of like this, with feathers on them. Some of them didn't have feathers on them. They looked more like this. They're called paw holes. People today still come in here. They'll leave feathers in there, paw holes, tobacco, sage. New Agers like to come in here and try to leave crystals. We don't let them. Although my theory is, if this place has meaning for you, go for it. I'll leave a crystal in there for you. Okay? Now this thing right here that looks like a chimney, that's a ventilator shaft. That's going to suck in fresh air. It's going to hit that wall, force the air around with the smoke coming through the smoke hole. Anyone have any questions? You have a question, sir.
Back over where we were at First City, I saw like it was more of a modern pole. It was kind of in the ground.
Yeah.
And it had this gold kind of seal over it, and it said USD, but it had something else on it.
U.S. Department of Interior.
Okay.
Yeah.
They were here first, or
No, that was put in 1930s. 1930s.
I know it wasn't like part of this.
That was
just
part of
wondering
these
what it
people
was
at
part
all.
of.
Anyone else have any questions? Well, we're going to be like our ancestral Puebloans, and we're going to migrate out. Now, these people, they took part in Mesa Verde with them, in their hearts, in their origin tales, and they still come back today. I hope you guys take part in Mesa Verde with you, and that you too come back someday. On your way out, look through that window right up there, straight up and to your right, you'll see something very beautiful. I want to thank you in Navajo, Ahenaka, for coming on my tour. I hope you guys have a great remainder of the day and have a safe journey to wherever you are going to. Ahenaka.
Well, we made it to Durango. We unfortunately don't have enough time to take the whole train ride, but we're going to take a look around. Let's go back and look at the train. You look like a hippie, Berkeley.
The third story, my best friend's father lived. I have the camera on it. It won't click down.
I'll take care of it. Quiet, please. Just wait. We're gonna head out and get some breakfast here. Do a little sightseeing in the town. Yeah.
The Painted Desert District of Petrified Forest National Park stretches before you 50,000 acres of colorful mesas, buttes, and badlands. Beyond the boundaries of the park, the Painted Desert runs west and north to a great arc, extending past the horizon almost to the edge of the Grand Canyon. The formation of the Painted Desert contains an invaluable record of Triassic plants and animals. Initially preserved for its scenic vistas, Petrified Forest has become an important resource of scientific community by protecting a storehouse of fossils and geological treasures. The paint of the desert comes from a chemical composition of sediments that formed the rock. At the Petrified Forest, iron oxides create red and pink tones, manganese produce blue and purple, and various carbons produce gray, black, and white.
Oh, she's out here looking for wildlife or a wild night. There she is, Miss Naturalist. Cut the film.
Oh, this is easy, man.
Where are we?
Petrified cliffs.
Painted Desert near the Petrified Forest. Is this in Arizona or Nevada or maybe New Mexico, Danny? Where were we this morning? What state?
The Petrified Cliffs and the Painted Forest.
I was getting to the painted forest, but I was rudely interrupted.
Let's take that over again.
The Painted Forest of the Petrified Cliffs
Well, there are petrified
In Mesquite.
near Mesquite, Oklahoma.
What caused this to be like this? Vegetation.
The badlands below you are formed from a colorful sequence of rock called Chilmley Formation. Most of the rocks are soft, fine-grained mudstone, siltstone, and claystone. Have you noticed the step-like features on the hillside below? These are the result of mass-down slope flowage. During summer downpours, clay in the outer layers absorb water and become heavy and pliable. Eventually, gravity causes a water-saturated clay to creep down the step slope, forming the step.
We've made it to the Kachina house. Let's go take a look. Hey buddy, can I have a ride?
My dad doesn't let me talk to strangers.
I couldn't hear you, what?
My dad doesn't let me talk to strangers.
He won't let
He's
you...
a really nice dad, so I'll see you later.
But... Don't you want to park and come in?
Yeah.
You can park over there.
Right here?
Yeah. Kachina house. Let's go take a look inside. Painted Desert Inn has been designated a National Historical Landmark. This site possesses national significance in commemorating the history of the United States of America. 1987 National Park Service. It may look like a rock, but it's actually a petrified log. Our three marvelous guys. John, give us a nice look.
When did they read a picture? Put your hand down.
So far, what about our trip do you like the most? Cliff Palace and Mesa Verde. The rainstorm today was pretty neat.
Yep. Almost
Okay, we're going to be moving on in a few minutes. We'll be headed to Winslow. Get into our hotel. We got to go do some laundry. I bet you we're missing at least 3 socks. Say goodbye to me.
Bye.
Don't do that.
Don't be rude. See, if you stand there long enough, Danny, maybe some young girl on a flatbed Ford will come by and pick you up.
No, purple shirt, white shirt, don't get this.
What do you think?
Look at those tourists.
Is that enough? Hi. What are you looking at, John?
No one.
Is this the girl in the flatbed Ford?
Yeah.
I think there's a famous poker player who's
Downtown Winslow, Arizona. Time to get in the car, huh, John?
Yeah.
This is such a big, wild city. Right here, along Route 66.
My name, brother. What are we getting, dollar? That's short answer. My name. They were, Daniel Barrington. His family still owns the place with, laboring under the tall coast. Nobody ever understood these things before. And they figured they'd be talking asteroids about the size of the bottom of this crater. It would have been worth a lot of money, just in iron and nickel. It's just purely a commercial operation.
So they're looking for it, or?
Oh, yeah. Been hard after it for 20 odd years.
How big do you guys think the crater was? I mean, not the crater, the
About
meteor.
150 feet across. The size of most of that lower parking lot there with the trucks in it. About like the part from this fence over to where that RV is. Pretty hard. Just fall down and go boom.
Now this is just older road.
Precisely. Yeah, these limestones are rather soft. They're susceptible to erosion. They'll start with water. All water, even before we were around, has some acid in it, various pHs. And that'll start acting on it. That'll start it, and then the wind out here is almost incessant. Just like you see, there's little rocks down in there. Two meteor impact sites are named for Daniel Moreau Barringer. We'll be getting more into who he was and what he was about toward the end of this. The other one is on the far side of the moon, so this one's a bit more convenient for us to deal with today. Well, let's stay here. What we have here is a very large hole. Any questions? Cool. I'll actually get right to that. Actually, we can start right there. How big is the hole? I'd like to think it's the biggest hole in the state, but that's a whole different issue. Or that I work for. Anyway, if you throw a rock from here to the opposite side, that's about 4,100 feet, so you'd definitely make the team there. If you were to walk the entire circumference of this, which we won't be doing today, that's between 2.5 and 3 miles, depending on where you step. The depth of this at the base comes in a little better than 570 feet, which is to say, if you were to put your favorite 60-story building in there, we'd be looking across the roofing ventilators, as you see the opposite rim there. The Washington Monument is actually a bit shorter than this is deep. The St. Louis Arch, someone told me, is about 45 feet taller than this is deep. What else? Redwoods, which fit comfortably in there. If you had the overwhelming desire to put football fields in there, you could put 20 of them. You could also play rugby or soccer, a little more interesting. But you could put 20 of them in there. You could have 2 million spectators comfortably lining the rim with plenty of extra seats and elbow room. And you still have room for the beer wagon down there. Very important. But I told you a little bit about the asteroid belt while we were in there. Now the asteroid belt is between Jupiter and Mars. These objects travel around out there like so much freeway traffic during rush hour. As long as they're going pretty much the same direction, same rate of speed, things work fine. You do have the occasional bad lane change, and they have a tendency to knock into each other and break apart. When this occurs in space, those fragments are referred to by science as meteoroid. Any of that material that enters the Earth's atmosphere, such as the shooting stars we see on occasion, is referred to as meteor. Any of that that does succeed in making landfall on Earth is referred to as meteorite. So it is truly more accurate to call this a meteorite crater than it is called a meteor crater, but we already printed the patches. We already printed the literature. Meteor crater it is. The collision in the asteroid belt that led to this particular event may have occurred as much as 500 million years ago, they tell me. Where they get that idea is completely beyond me. Nobody's told me. So I believe that is what they call, in modern science, a guess. As far as when the impact itself occurred, we have a good physical record. The rock I'm standing on, everything we just walked over is ejected. Material was cast out as the crater was formed. This deep red layer of strata forms sort of a bathtub ring around here. And you see some exposed bits of it out there where that's in its natural state, laid bare by wind erosion. That is the Moenkopi layer of sandstone, Triassic era deposit, and that's what essentially belongs on top here. It's the naturally occurring top layer of strata. All the stuff you see above that is the slopes up to the crater, and here on the rim, that's ejected. This limestone material right here has chlorine compounds in it that break down at a very predictable rate when they're exposed to sunlight. By studying that rate of decay, they figured that this event occurred about 50,000 years ago, and it should be accurate, give or take 3,000 years. So had we been here that fateful day, some 50,000 years ago, it'd be a bit lonesome for us. There were no other humans out here or anything close to it. About our closest relative would be a great sloth, which still got some in my family tree, but that's a little different. If we were out here chewing on great sloth munchies, there would have been more of it. There was indeed quite a bit more. This was a lush grassland at that time. The water table was significantly higher. This initially formed a shallow lake when it was a brand new crater. The table is currently about 160 feet beneath the crater's base. Aside from that lush vegetation, it would be pretty much the same surrounding landscape, the undulating high desert plateau, rather similar volcanic activity you'd have around present-day Flagstaff. So had we looked up from our sloth meal with our great sloth eyes and noticed the pinpoint of light as the meteor at that point enters the Earth's atmosphere, would have knocked us stone blind if we'd watched that for a few moments. They figure it quickly attained the brightness of over 100 times what we're used to seeing as sunlight. The object, about the size of most of that lower parking lot, about 150 feet across, was screaming through the Earth's atmosphere, quite literally. Considerable pressure wave in front of itself, a lot of light, a lot of heat, a lot of noise. They figured this thing came in at about 40,000 miles per hour. An object passing New York at that rate of speed would pass Los Angeles in less than 4 minutes. So it was making tracks. At that rate of speed, it came down here, slammed into dear old Mother Earth, found its way down, and shot through the stuff like a bullet. These are limestones and sandstones, that iron nickel bolide, quite a dense mass in its own right, even if it was a clustered mass, a lot of carrying weight and force there, inertia. The object then found its way down beneath the water table. At this point, it's already defeated a considerable amount of odds just in getting this far. The Earth's atmosphere becomes progressively thicker as you get closer to the surface. These objects spend untold millennia out there in the cosmos with very little force acting on them. They're ultra frozen. They're basically just cruising along minding their own business in weightlessness. Gets drawn into a gravitational pull, and in the case of Earth, you have that thickening atmosphere. Suddenly, they figured this only took about 7 to 10 seconds to make that entire journey through the Earth's atmosphere. During that 7 to 10 seconds, this mass still ultra frozen on the inside is being heated to the point of vaporizing iron on the exterior. They figure it lost about 1% of its mass doing this. The pressure differences between the leading and trailing edge are intense. Most of them just can't hang with this. They hit critical mass, they explode. If you notice, if you have an occasion to see shooting stars, and you see a lot of it here of the high desert, with the high altitude we have here, the thin desert air, and we're away from city lights, but particularly large ones. They'll get brighter and brighter and just flare out. That stuff generally just hits the ground like pea gravel and under, sometimes down to just little itty-bitty bits of dust. This one did defy those odds, shot its way down through here. At that point, it released all that pent-up kinetic energy, and the effect was very, very similar to what you'd find in an underground nuclear explosion. Dr. Eugene Shoemaker, and a big one, Eugene Shoemaker, who created the Bureau of Astrogeology as part of the U.S. Geologic Survey, made extensive comparative analyses between the two types of events, and based largely on that work, they figured the above-ground shock wave from this event would have erased absolutely everything in a 7-mile radius. You take a look out at the RV park out there, the cluster of buildings, that tower, that's about 5 miles out. So even 2 miles distant from that would have been absolute devastation. And of course to a lessening extent as that shock wave dissipates. Subterranean shock wave, like a roll, going out in every direction. One effect of that is still quite visible. The white material you see there was brought up by the mining operations is coking into sandstone. Same as what we've just been walking on the path here. However, down there, those shock waves pulverized it so intensely that we refer to that material as rock flour. It's a very fine, powdery substance. A very annoying thing to dig mine shafts in, as Behringer's people found out. A lot of this material would have been cast upward, mixed in with itself, and fell back into this forming basin like a big tossed salad or a bowl of gumbo. The nice, fancy Latin scientific word for that is breccia. Basically means a tossed salad or a big bowl of gumbo. Actually, it's dissimilar elements all together at random. That material, of course, falls about the surrounding area, forming the ejecta blanket that you see sloping up toward us here. And what happened about the perimeter of the crater is an interesting little bit called reverse strata. It's also referred to as invert strata. It is very common to these type of events and very unusual otherwise. Volcanoes, I don't think any of them do it. But what happens, picture a bomb or layer cake. As this material blasted upward and outward, it laid back over itself around the perimeter. So you got your geologic strata flipped, directly in reverse. Even some of the substrata, as we'll see at the next stop, where it's very plain to view. One of the primary reasons the Apollo astronauts were out here working. And we will get more specific with that over there. Already covered the stars. Let's go do it. Actually, I'll give you right now one of the common questions. What angle did this come in at? A lot of people think they know this. A lot of people insist they know this. A lot of dissensions. Barringer was convinced that it packed its way down underneath that rim. I'll get more into that in a bit. That is the prevailing thought these days. Mr. Eugene Shoemaker, who did extensive analyses of this, was convinced it came from that area and packed its way down under where we're going to be finishing our tour at Photo Point. Initially, they thought it came straight down. There's a considerable deposit of the white coconino off that back rim where you see the road from a pit mining operation. Could mean it came in this way, could mean it came in that way. If you ever go out plinking, you shoot a sand, it comes back at you. As you look around the perimeter of this, the entire perimeter would have been higher during its formation and slumped back into itself, fractured like an eggshell. So if you look at it with an eye toward geology, every answer breeds at least a dozen questions. Personally, I don't think we'll ever know what angle it came in at. That's just part of the cool mystery of things. As far as what happened to the meteorite when it hit, again, the dynamics very, very similar to that of a rather good-sized nuke. It came in at that speed. It just all the pent-up kinetic energy. Shoemaker's analysis is, from what I've read, is the one I favor so far. A lot of people make quite an emphasis on the steam explosion, since the water table was impacted, and surely that would have been a factor. The velocity itself surely would have been a factor. Shoemaker made most play of the rebounding shock waves, and also for the crater structure, and he proved this out by making nukes do the same thing. In fact, comparative analysis he did, they did 2 shots, 58 I think it was. One was called Django U, and one was called Teapot S. Same device, buried at different depths. Django U netted a completely different result. The deeper the two made a small model of this, including the invert strata. And that led Shoemaker to believe that the primary factor here was, you figure all that shock can travel through the air quite freely. And then down through the ground, it's only going to go in so far and come back at you, just as if it were a buried explosive device. And there you have this reverse strata effect, etc. As for what that did to the meteorite, he figured to line the shaft that it created when it initially punched in, so there's a lot of pure core material, which is very, very rare out here. So he figures that would have been what lined that shaft, and then when the shock waves came, it spread it all about the area. And what happened, a lot of the rest of it was shocked into the surrounding rock from the meteorite exploding in its own right. Those are the oxides that we found around the area, mostly tiny little bits and parts, ones that you can fit comfortably in the palm of your hand are, again, quite rare and pricey. And those, of course, have been oxidizing for 50,000 years. And most of it vaporized. Some say as much as 80%. So again, think nuke. Right after all these big heavy chunks of rock got finished falling around this area, in the moments that followed, this big boiling vaporous mushroom cloud of vaporized iron and vaporized rock can't stay that way in the atmosphere for long, settles out, and it just rained iron. Considerable evidence of that. The sands in a 7-mile radius to here are just loaded with the stuff. Trick is most of it's microscopic. And ones the size of a little grain of sand are the big ones. So with that, let's head on over to the next stop. Down there is a marvelous mode of power, that steam boiler. Steam winch is a gorgeous piece of equipment. It's got 2 big double-acting cylinders like an old Stanley. That was from 1905, the pinnacle of the steam era. But anyhow, what we have right here are the reverse strata. These are the strata of which this area is composed. Mother Nature was kind enough to put on contrasting colors for us. The deep red layer, again, the Moenkopi layer of sandstone. In the center of that layer down, you see natural order of things, but for a bit of upheaval. Beneath that, you're getting into your Kaibab limestones. We're back in the Permian age, 240 to 260 million years back. The base of the crater, the aforementioned pulverized coconino sandstone, again Permian. These are all waterborne sediments. This area has been an ancient. You get up to what appears to be a seam or a vein of that white coconino. It's not. The only reason it's out there is because it was cast out from this crater. And this is the best preserved meteor impact site on the face of the Earth. It's not the largest, I don't believe it's the youngest, but it is the best preserved owing to our remarkably arid climate out here. So it has been and still is the ideal model for study to learn just how these things work, what they do, cratering dynamics and meteoritics. That is what brought the Apollo gentlemen out here. All the Apollo astronauts and their alternates trained here extensively in the time between 1964 and 1972. Training was led by Dr. Eugene Shoemaker and his assistant David Roddy, who still comes out here and works with his crews. Made extensive use of this trail, which was redubbed the Astronaut Trail in their honor when they freshened it up for them. And what they were doing here, they were field testing hardware, they were doing physical conditioning. They were also learning geology. The astronauts were the premier jet jockeys of their day. Very qualified men, top men in their field. Their field was not geology. So they were brought up to speed out here, and where the reverse strata comes into play, on the matter of geology, they wanted to get a little bit more done up there on the moon than just smacking golf balls around, taking snapshots, waving hi to mom. They did want to obtain geologic specimens. And generally, a geologist would core, drill, or mine, or dig in some fashion to get at the old stuff, the deeply buried ancient specimens of an area under study. And just to transport that sort of equipment, a tour guide, to the moon would have been grossly impractical, if not impossible, at that time. To land inside an impact crater on the moon involved logistics that were simply not acceptable, and they just didn't have to do that. By studying here, if you were to pick up any of these white rocks at your feet, and you're free to do so, many feet beneath where we're standing, they could surface collect in a like fashion on the moon. From what they learned here, they could form calculations and formulas, accounting, of course, for the 1/6 gravity and the utter lack of atmosphere on the moon. And they could surface collect in very similar fashion using their retrieval devices that they practice using here. I'll call them lunar pooper scoopers, or LPS, but I don't think they did. But same idea. But they could surface collect in a like fashion and figure where these specimens were coming from relative to their initial depth with a great degree of accuracy. Improved the quality of the work that was being done up there, saved us a whole lot of money, and it just kind of make things warm and fuzzy all the way around. Another thing that happened out here, on the matter of field testing hardware, they did have the lunar dune buggy out here for a time outside there. It took the United States to put dune buggies on the moon. But astronaut Charles Duke, while training out here, tore one of his spacesuits on some of these jagged rocks. Did not make him a happy fella. In fact, I understand he was very upset. It's very hot. Words were exchanged, a nice calm version to go something like, guys, if it happens up there, I'm toast. And of course he would have been. You don't get to tear a spacesuit on the moon and live to tell about it. So literally back to the drawing board went the Apollo landing suits. This lesson is still quite fresh in the minds of NASA. Last September there were spacesuit engineers out here from Houston, Texas with a prototype Mars landing suit. The suit looked about equal parts Buck Rogers and Michelin Man, much better articulated than the Apollo suits ever were. And the suit was being worn by a very small-built woman, and as she pointed out, they made one size fits all. So she was afforded the luxury of being able to wriggle her arm inside and scratch her nose if she had to. Guys like us wouldn't get this chance. But the suit weighs in at some 300 pounds. So they were doing some very real work to see if she could do this kind of work that would be called for on a Martian surface, as it was on the moon surface, collecting materials and such, uneven terrain, real conditions, wearing a 300-pound tuxedo. Now, on Mars, with the comparative gravity, if that same type of suit were employed, it would only weigh about 100 pounds. But by the time you have an astronaut all geared up, you're more than likely at or past that 300-pound figure all over again. So it is very real stuff they do here. We have never charged the Geologic Survey or NASA to utilize this facility, although we are still privately owned, and I'll get more into that later. Another same material in some of these shocked white coconino sandstones right here at Meteor Crater. That discovery in 1960 is what finally made it a hard, firm science fact that this is indeed a meteor impact site. It was the first one so proven. The same test was then applied to any suspected site worldwide. Scientists doubt things for a living. They're good at it. And until you can remove all basis of doubt, you're still in that fuzzy realm of theory. So Behringer's work had made this a well-accepted theory as far back as 1922, but in fact it was not until 1960.
So Brian, what was the other popular theory? Alien land theft?
That could be.
Yeah.
That could be. Some people think we dug it out as a septic tank, but it actually will not hold water. One of my very first tours, we make the point oftentimes when talking about the dry climate and the preservation of this won't hold water. When you do get rain here, you get between 6 and 8 inches of moisture here on an average annual basis, including snowmelt. When you do get that, it happens all at once. Last September, they had over an inch in less than an hour. You see these rivulets to the side. They were already there, but they were freshened up quite a bit by the cascade of water. Stuff went down there, and rather than pooling in the bottom, it shoots right through this like a coffee filter. And the surrounding area, pools of water, cattle stuck in mud. So one of my very first tours got said, that big of a septic tank. I said, well, sir, I'm sure you're right, but we'd rather not think of it just that one. But another mineral that was discovered in those same specimens in 1962 was stishovite. And stishovite, you got the same thing, only different. It's another shock compressed form of silica. But to recreate stishovite takes over 2 million pounds per square inch. So a clear scientific indicator of intense release here. I mean, just 2 million psi spontaneously released would send an incredible shockwave, make a big mess out of things. And it's suspected there were tens, if not hundreds of times more force than that. But again, theory. But the hard fact is 2 million psi. So with that, let's head on over to the next stop. It goes back to that return address at Diablo Canyon. Had a nice ring to it. 1891, Chief Geologist of the United States came out here. His name is Grove Carl Gilbert. He was dispatched to the Arizona Territory to do a complete, thorough, and proper geologic survey. This he did. His works on the San Francisco peaks and surrounding area are still the definitive on the topic. And he came out to analyze this and see if it could indeed be the site of a meteor impact. Gilbert was one of the people that was advancing and promoting the theory that the craters on the moon were of impact origin. Prevailing scientific thought at the time held they were volcanic. Volcanism was understood. Nobody knew the first thing about these. So he came out here in hopes to prove this out. Trick to that was there was absolutely no precedent or working knowledge. So he came out here and there were certain common sense, erroneous assumptions that went with this analysis. You look at this from ground level or even from a shallow aerial view, it appears to be round. It's actually more square, cleavage of the rocks, but they figured it was round and object had to have fallen straight in. Secondly, they figured it should be about the size of the base of the crater. Thirdly, it's just sitting there waiting for them. In an effort to locate it, they did some scientific experiments as hanging large magnets from larger poles, see if they might deflect out toward this vast chunk of iron. Didn't happen. They went about the perimeter with compasses, watching for the needle to indicate this big chunk of iron. Didn't happen. 3 days into this, they packed up and left. His conclusion was that this was nothing other than a volcanic steam vent, such as the several he had just surveyed around Flagstaff, and that was it. Now, owing to the strength of his reputation as Chief Geologist of the U.S., it was a very difficult opinion to run up against, particularly for an amateur such as Daniel Moreau Barringer. Barringer and Holsinger met each other in 1902 at a hotel down in Tucson known as the Xavier. Holsinger, we think, may have had a government post out here, possibly forestry, but they met up out there, and turns out over brandy, cigars, and conversation that Mr. Barringer was a mining engineer from Philadelphia who was out there looking after his copper interest. And upon Holsinger's telling him about a 4,100-foot hole with all kinds of 92% iron and 7% nickel about the area, he was quite excited. Going back to the same assumption, big hole, big rock. You can have a 3,000-foot plus chunk of this 92% pure iron out here. That would have been an absolute mining bonanza. Tens of millions of nice hard $1902 if it had proved to be the case. Sends Holsinger out here to have a look. Holsinger decided that was the case. Holsinger was hired as a full-time mining foreman. That house there was eventually built for Holsinger's use in 1911. And Mr. Barringer sent his brother-in-law down to D.C. They took out 4 fee simple mining patents. Back in the territorial day, these were done very much the same as a homestead arrangement. Pardon me. You sign the dotted line, occupy the site, make the improvements, which for a miner means to poke holes in things, and it becomes yours. You can pass it to your family perpetually. Those compacts were signed in 1903 by then President Theodore Roosevelt. After the spring thaw, Mr. Barringer came out here to see how things are going. Holsinger's crews were already at work. Now, these guys were sophisticated mining engineers, such as it was back then, but with their assumptions, they went after this like Boy Scouts in their backyard digging for a treasure chest. Thought it was just there waiting for them. That may or may not explain why I'm dressed like this. I haven't figured that one out yet. But they had a lot of tenacity. They took that shaft down 240 feet before they gave it up. At about 160, they hit the water table. You mix water with pulverized coconut sandstone. You get that gooey, slushy, familiar thing we know as quicksand. In this case, a very abrasive quicksand at that. Turned out to make a wonderful drilling abrasive in later years when they switched to core drilling off the back wall. But initially, it was a pure nuisance. That's where the equipment comes in. That boiler and winch were brought in 1911, or in 05, pardon me. The boiler is a superheater, such as you find at the nose end of a steam locomotive. It's about 10 feet high, about 15 feet long. Lovely winch next to it. It's got the 2 double-acting cylinders like an old Stanley. Beautiful piece of equipment. And those were brought in off that corner. You see there's a fault there. Not a thrust, but a simple fault. Carries right over behind me here. And just to the left of that, they built a great slide with a mule-driven winch at the top, where they just unreel the cable and let these things down the slide, strapped on boards. Mules themselves came down the switchback trails. If they didn't care for that, they were strapped on boards, taking down the winch. Mules can be difficult. The little note about the water itself, you don't have it out here, and then all of a sudden you got too much of it, or it's in the wrong place, or something you simply can't deal with. All the above happened down there. You couldn't run the boiler with it. They're pulling out water that had so much of that abrasive silica in it, it would have clogged it and or chewed it out from the inside. So they had to send their mule teams 2 miles out to Diablo, bucket the water from the depths of that crevasse, bring it back on their mule wagons to some tanks they had installed by the rock house, let it out through these iron pipes. They could stoke the boilers, they could run the cable winch, they could pull out more water you couldn't run your boiler with. as it's also falling in as quickly as you're bucketing it out. This is the beginning of the frustration out here. It got a lot worse over the years, did not get any better. Two things Behringer was trying to do out here. For one thing, he's trying to make a whole bunch of money. For another thing, he's trying to convince the scientific community that this is a meteor impact site. Neither of these things are going very well. When he reported to the Academy of Sciences in 1909 that most of what he found in the way of irons were from a few grains to a few ounces in weight, that was just fuel to the fire of his detractors. I've been told they laughed him off stage, which would have annoyed him tremendously. Came out here, redoubled his efforts. You see the other scarring. He tried this direct approach repeatedly, doing exploration. Wasn't turning up much. Eventually he switched to core drilling off the back rim. He got the notion of impact at an angle, and that's what caused that upheaval of strata. Seeking a way to prove this out, his detractors were saying, how could it possibly leave a round hole, as they still thought this was, that came in at an angle? The answer to that started with a little accident here, a little firearm safety lesson actually. Old Danny Boy's out shooting rabbits one day, almost lost his foot. The shot went off at an angle and left a round hole. Left him a good repeatable experiment. He started taking anybody that watched him do this, from newspapermen, prospective investors, anybody with Sunday afternoon off, could go out and watch him with shoot rifles and shotguns into half-baked mud. When you went straight down, you got a round hole, increase the angle. More often than not, he still got round holes. Showed him what he wanted to hear. They went off to the south rim, spent several years poking holes out there. Most important thing he found out here was in 1922, that drill hole number 1, as he called it. When he got in over 1,000 feet, he's pulling up cores of the Supai Formation. Supai is the 4th layer of strata beneath us. These cores were coming up intact, unbroken. There's no Supai splashed out in this area, although you find the other 3 layers of strata. It's not a blowout. If this were volcanism, it would have thrown everything out. So that refuted the chief geologist's opinion, finally paved the way for Behringer's opinion to be accepted, which it was. So it was a well-accepted theory during his lifetime. As a commercial success, this was anything but. It was a complete disaster, money pit if you will. Late in the 20s, after several setbacks, he goes back to Philly to solicit financial support. Got there in time for the stock market to crash and did not find people in much of a spending mood. He died in late 29, and going back to the terms of the fee simple mining patents, this land was inherited by the Behringer family, and they do still own it today. Initially, they were not very excited about this. You've got a wealthy family in Philadelphia that just inherited a 4,100-foot hole in Arizona. It's got Arizona state tax revenue attached to it, payable every year. They tried to unload it. They went to the federal government, and the feds had acquired the Grand Canyon in 1919. So being in possession of the greatest ditch known to man, they were not in the market for a large hole at that time. They tried to give it to Arizona straight out at least twice. Just take this thing, please. And Arizona didn't want it. They got the tax bill coming in every year. It suited them just fine. So they were essentially stuck with it. In 1941, Barty Bar Ranch became interested in the site. Barty Bar is an immense operation. They have over 300,000 acres under their control, mostly leased. Second largest ranch in Arizona. And they wanted it for grazing. It was literally and figuratively a hole in their operation. Put in for lease at the Behringers. They got it December 8, 1941. And on January 4-2, the old Holsinger house became the first museum on site. Ranch boss's wife, Emma Chilson, would let you in there. I believe she had coffee, donuts, and meteorites. But you could view the Holsinger and other specimens. You could walk down inside the crater, pretty much do as you feel. They had promised the Behringers they would be good custodians of the site, because the Behringers' attitude had warmed toward this. It was their father's life, work, and legacy. And it's a very happy arrangement. That went on for quite some while. In 1955, Barty Bar broke off. They had the grander notion for what this has become, and is still growing and changing. And they broke off a separate privately held corporation, Meteor Crater Enterprises, engaged in another lease for 199 years. So Anthony over there and I get to retire in 2154.
In our journey, our travels here, we've gone to Meteor Crater, slightly west of Winslow, Arizona. Taking a lot of film with the tour guides talking to us. So, John, should we head back?
Yeah.
Okay, babe.
We're headed down into Walnut Canyon here. We'll see if we can survive. Please wait up for me. I don't want to be alone.
I don't want to be alone.
Didn't you wear that shirt for the last 3 days?
How did the people get down into this? They probably climbed. That doesn't look like the biggest climb in the world. You know? Can you go down there with the flood?
The ranger?
Yeah.
Well, this is where...
Cool.
Okay, Kashka. Enter, please.
This is nice and
Our
cool.
family portrait. This is our new house.
Okay.
And Danny's still getting in the way of the camera.
And Danny's had that shirt on for 3 days. It's in all the videos, the same shirt.
But it seems cool here, doesn't it?
It's not bad. Shall we go ahead? Are you an Indian maiden? Different kind of rock formations down here than at Mesa Verde. Very interesting. Very quiet. More ruins on the other side. Quite a little community at times here. That could be Mom and Dad's room. It's the biggest room, the biggest master room.
And then you guys get that over these. Let's give John that last one over there.
Over here or over there?
I don't know if John would survive. Some mountain lion would eat him.
I get a bed.
Mine's the middle one.